Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In today's session on symbolic expression, we have with us Ms. Manisha, who is going to translate the language in sign language. So today's discussion, we have Sociological Imagination by C. Wright Mills. Now C. Wright Mills was writing during the post-Second World War and Cold War period at a time when sociology was the juncture of evolving, and therefore he was kind of suggesting certain framework or guideline for the discipline of sociology and the social responsibility of sociologists. So he was actually critical of structural functionalist approach. Why? Because the structural functionalist argued that society was a structure, a network of relation, and it was kind of made of part and whole, and each part contributed to the maintenance of whole. So it was a kind of a balance. Everything was on a status quo. C. Wright Mills was critical of this approach, and he says that this is a kind of a grand theory. Society is not only a series of systems, but they are kind of different structures, and the relation of individual to the structure are variant. So there is a question of power. Those who have power are able to change the structure. Therefore, besides the function of system, what is important is to look in conflict. The conflict between common man and the elite. So he was kind of critical of power and politics. So when he is writing the text, the sociological imagination, he is also critical of two approaches in social sciences. Number one, grand theory, and number two, abstract empiricism. Grand theory in sociology, he was trying to draw attention to what he kind of considers what was grand theory. For C. Wright Mills, grand theory was a kind of an approach that tried to explain all structures. So it gave us a universal understanding of society, something that was similar in across time and space. In order to understand the grand theory, he is saying that this theorization creates highly abstract concept, and it does not explain specific social interaction. The general description is what C. Wright Mills called concept with a capital C. He was of opinion that grand theory is obsessed with concept. They are kind of giving us a number of concepts, say social fact, social action, social system. Now these concepts are not necessarily coming from empirical reality. It was more in terms of hypothetical. These are abstract concepts created in the mind of the social scientist, and it's coming from theorization, not from the actual interaction between individual and their behavior. C. Wright Mills identified a number of flaws in the grand theory. He argued that these grand theory failed to preserve freedom, which was the main goal of social science. He outlines two main flaws that cause this failure. Number one, irrelevance, and number two, inaccessibility. By focusing entirely on abstract concepts rather than specific societal example, grand theory is irrelevant to the lives of individuals. People cannot make sense of these concepts. because these concepts are not coming from everyday life. Grand theory also lack relevance because these concepts were constructed in a different period of time and space. So it fails to preserve the freedom in that it cannot help individual understand their social problems, their personal problems, neither the problems in their own life nor in the society. The only critique that Mills does of the grand theory is by looking into Talcott-Parsons' theory. He criticizes Talcott-Parsons' social system theory. Number one, he argues that Parsons' theory fails to look into social conflict, social change, domination and power relationship as it is found in the society. Talcott-Parsons seemed to think of a one big social system and that all society operate the same way. Similarly, his theory of social action tends to arrive at an assumption that all social action across society are similar. The theory of action is kind of unable to look into the individual's deviance from the larger model. So it's an hypothetical model. And in this kind of general and universal approach that C. Wright Mills dislikes, and he argues that the grand theory is too general to answer actual sociological problems. The second problem with social science approach was his concept of abstract empiricism. Empiricism means beginning with the observation of data. Abstraction means turning this data into trend or pattern. So empiricism is kind of your concepts or data that's arrived on the basis of the grounded research. Now once the research is done, certain kind of data collected, the sociologist or social scientist turns these data into grand theorization on the basis that if it happened in one society, it was assumed to happen in the other society. For C. Wright Mills, neither empiricism nor abstraction are inherently wrong, but sociology has been practicing a particular kind of abstracted empiricism. He has in mind the increasing popularity of interviewing people for the opinion, coding this opinion into punch card and then extrapolating to society as a whole. So the method or social science methodology is problematic. It is not about taking opinions or doing a poll or a survey. It is actually about understanding the social problem within the social context. Sociology has become obsessed, according to Mills, with the public opinion. Mills' opposition to abstracted empiricism was based on its preoccupation with method and its consequent lack of substantive proposition and theories. Abstracted empiricists, according to Mill, project themselves as scientists and they approach as akin to the scientific procedure of natural sciences. So if we go back to the emergence of sociology as a discipline, the social scientists were into that task of building a sociology as a science very close to natural sciences. C. Wright Mill was critical of this. He felt that such an approach would lead to fetishism of method, an obsession with reality, and more concern with philosophy of science than with the social research study itself. Abstracted empiricists are adopting one philosophy of science derived pragmatically from one's perspective of natural sciences. And they were kind of arguing that this methodology, which was kind of modeled around natural sciences, was up to date or was accurate to capture social reality, which is always changing. It's not the same. It changes with space, it changes with time, and it also changes constantly. So to kind of arrive at a method, or what is to be called as a scientific method, very close to the natural sciences, was highly problematic. The end result is a methodological inhibition. Problems are selected that fit the method. Sociological work hinges on a methodic specialization detached from content or problem or area of inquiry. Theory is not adequately interrelated with data. So you are kind of making a abstracted connection between data and theory, which is kind of forceful, and therefore the task of sociology is kind of concerned or questionable. If grand theory was concerned with concept, abstracted empiricism is obsessed with method, with capital M. The problem, according to Mill, is that survey of opinion rarely come with explanation of how or why opinion were created or shared. So most of the time when we do surveys or we are taking opinion, we are not going into the root of how those opinions were arrived at, or how was this opinion between two individuals placed in different social contexts differed. So just knowing the opinion is not sufficient. Such a study, according to Mill, does not answer any social scientific question. It turns sociology into a merely technical profession of counting people and opinion. So C. Wright Mill was critical of Lazarsfeld, who argued that sociology was kind of a methodological tool. He ignored the idea that it is a discipline which is kind of existing in everyday life of individuals. So he was critical. C. Wright Mill was critical of polling as a method of doing social science research. He pointed at some of the limitation of polling as a method. Number one, it enables only to collect data on what people report as the opinion. The report or the data collected is tied to individual rather than to the social structure. So the opinion which the individual or the respondents make are identified as individual's problem without any reference to the social milieu which led to the formation of that opinion. Polling kind of risk, he calls polling risk, which is, he terms it as psychologism. Psychologism is actually explaining human behavior at the individual level without any connection to the social context. C. Wright Mills argued that psychologism may lead to the separation of research from theory. He also talks about practicality. Now, what is practicality? Practicality means putting sociological work into practice. Practicality means how do you think that sociology as grand theory, sociology as science of society is applicable in everyday life. How can we practice sociology? And therefore, he says that there are two main kinds of use that a sociology can undertake in the study of society. The first he calls as ideological, affirming or challenging the mainstream and those with authority in a society. So, the ideology most of the time is the ideology of the ruling class or those who have power. Now, as a sociologist or a social scientist, it is important to critique these ideology. Ideologically, sociology can either justify or criticize. Historically, according to C. Wright Mills, sociology has a liberal ideology. C. Wright Mills felt sociology has turned into a conservative ideology. Why? Because it focuses more and more on specialized milieu instead of a larger social structure. And in that case, sociology has lost a systematic critique of the economy, of the political system, of the ideology. He also talks about bureaucratic ethos. According to C. Wright Mill, because of the two approach, the grand theorization and abstract empiricism, collecting data, opinion through polls and survey, the social science has turned into a bureaucrat. It functions like a bureaucracy. And in that context, there is a denial of freedom and there is kind of it works within boundaries. The social science discipline has started serving the interest of bureaucratic client. So the new social science research is spreading the ethos of bureaucracy into other spheres of cultural, moral and intellectual life. So instead of cultivating scholars' university, it becomes a training center that produces pollster. So he is kind of looking into these two poles, grand theory and abstracted empiricism, and trying to convince that social science is a midway between the two, and we need to kind of connect concepts, methods and theory together. And in that sense, he advocated interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity in the sense that it is not necessary that we do away with the boundary, but each one of us as learned scholars are aware of what is happening in the other discipline. And in that sense, we will be able to have a more comprehensive understanding of society. So with this understanding of social imagination as a critique of the classical sociology and the way forward to develop sociological imagination, we are able to understand society as we live and connect to society. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.